The town of Pine Hollow was known for its quiet streets and tight-knit community, but the stillness was shattered on a chilly December morning when 17-year-old Emily Lawson was found dead on the outskirts of town. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident would soon unravel into one of the most shocking and devastating scandals Pine Hollow had ever seen. Emily was known to most residents as a hard-working, shy girl from a modest family. She was in her final year at Pine Hollow High School and worked part-time at the diner, where the sheriff, Carl Stone, was a regular customer. Sheriff Stone, a rugged man in his early 50s, was respected in the town for his dedication to keeping Pine Hollow safe. But Carl's dedication came with a heavy toll on his marriage to his wife, Lena, a woman with a temper that could flare up as fast as a summer thunderstorm. Lena had always been protective of her husband, even to the point of jealousy. She often complained about the long hours Carl spent away from home and questioned him constantly about his interactions with townspeople, especially the younger women he would meet at the diner. Carl brushed it off, claiming it was part of the job and that Lena's suspicions were unfounded. But behind the scenes, a dangerous secret was building. Emily had struck up a friendship with Sheriff Stone during her late shifts at the diner. The sheriff would sit at the counter, sharing stories and listening to Emily talk about her dreams of leaving Pine Hollow to study nursing. Over time, their conversations grew more personal and their friendship turned into something darker, something Emily hadn't anticipated but couldn't easily escape. Emily's best friend, Jenna, noticed her change in demeanor in the weeks leading up to her death. Emily seemed more withdrawn, often looking over her shoulder as if she was being watched. Jenna asked her about it, but Emily only shrugged, saying she was tired from work. Jenna suspected there was more to it than Emily was letting on, but she couldn't imagine the extent of the turmoil brewing beneath the surface the night before Emily's death. She had shown up unexpectedly at Sheriff Stone's home. Lena, who had been nursing suspicions about her husband's increasingly distracted behavior, watched from the shadows as Carl opened the door, his face pale with shock when he saw Emily. Lena couldn't hear their conversation, but she caught enough to know something was deeply wrong. Emily left after a few tense minutes, her face a mix of fear and defiance, as Carl shut the door behind her, visibly shaken. The next morning, Emily's body was discovered near the riverbank. Her face was bruised, and her arms bore the unmistakable marks of a struggle. The sheriff's office, led by Carl himself, launched an immediate investigation, eager to find answers and put the town at ease. But as more details emerged, fingers began pointing in a direction no one in Pine Hollow wanted to believe, straight back at Sheriff Stone. As the investigation unfolded, whispers circulated through town. Had Carl been involved with Emily? Had Lena, known for her fierce jealousy, discovered the affair and lashed out in a fit of rage? For Detective Marla Hayes, who had recently joined the sheriff's office from a larger precinct, the pieces weren't adding up. Detective Marla Hayes, known for her sharp instincts and meticulous approach, was immediately suspicious of the circumstances surrounding Emily's death. Something about the case felt personal, messy, as if the killer had left behind not just evidence, but emotions. She noticed the tight-knit dynamics of Pine Hollow at play. People whispered but refused to speak up, as if protecting their own secrets, making Marla's work harder. Marla began by examining Emily's recent interactions. The last people who had seen her at the diner recalled her looking tense and distracted. When she questioned Jenna, Emily's best friend, she heard a troubling story. Emily had recently confided in Jenna that she was pregnant. Marla's eyes widened as Jenna tearfully revealed that Emily had been seeing an older man, someone she hadn't named, but who she said was well-respected and could ruin her life if anyone found out. The implication was clear, but Marla wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. Sheriff Carl Stone's reputation was beyond reproach until now. Still, Marla had to tread carefully. Carl was her superior, and any accusation without evidence could easily backfire on her career and reputation. Yet the town's whispers grew louder, suggesting that Carl's so-called mentorship of Emily was more than friendly. Days later, Marla received an anonymous letter at the station. Written in shaky handwriting, it read, "Check Lena's car." No name, no return address, just those 3 words. Marla's heart raced. The message didn't specify why, but she decided to follow this lead. She knew she had to be discreet, so she arranged to inspect the vehicle under the guise of a routine safety check. What Marla found shocked her. Inside the trunk, beneath a pile of blankets, was a blood-stained scarf, a scarf Jenna later identified as Emily's. The blood spatter was faint but unmistakable. unmistakable. It was enough to raise Marla's suspicions even higher. Lena was brought in for questioning the next morning. She sat across from Marla, her eyes cold and defiant, refusing to meet Marla's gaze. When asked about her whereabouts on the night of Emily's death, Lena claimed she was home all evening, nursing a headache. But Marla pressed on, hinting at Carl's possible infidelity and how painful that must have been for Lena. She watched as Lena's composure cracked for just a moment, her lips tightening into a thin line. "He's my husband," Lena finally whispered, her voice tinged with anger. "He promised me a life together, and I stood by him. That girl, she was nothing but trouble, coming around, making a fool of him, and of me." Marla felt a chill run down her spine. Lena's words dripped with resentment, and there was a rage beneath her calm exterior. But Lena denied any involvement in Emily's death, claiming that she had no reason to harm her, even if Emily had caused problems. Still, the blood-stained scarf told a different story. As Marla wrapped up the interview, her mind churned over the mounting evidence. Lena's jealousy, the scarf, and Emily's pregnancy. It all painted a damning picture. And yet, Marla wasn't convinced. Something about Lena's reactions felt controlled, almost rehearsed, as though she was hiding a different truth. Just as Marla began to piece together the events of that fatal night, another unexpected twist surfaced. A young man named Caleb, a former student at Pine Hollow High, walked into the station with a tip. He claimed he'd seen Emily arguing with Sheriff Stone himself near the riverbank just hours before her body was found. Marla's pulse quickened at the revelation. Detective Marla Hayes felt the weight of the case growing heavier with each new revelation. Caleb's account of seeing Sheriff Stone and Emily arguing near the river added a troubling layer to the investigation. Marla knew she couldn't let this information slide, despite the danger of probing her own superior. She approached Sheriff Stone in his office that afternoon, deciding to confront him directly. Carl was visibly weary, his eyes tired and wary, but he kept his composure as Marla questioned him. When she asked about the argument Caleb had witnessed, Carl let out a long, slow sigh. "Yes, I met with Emily that night," he admitted, his voice a mixture of sadness and shame. "She told me she was pregnant, and I didn't react well. I told her she needed to leave town, that we couldn't be seen together anymore. I know it was harsh, but I was trying to protect my family. I never wanted this to happen." Marla watched him carefully, noting the tremor in his hands as he spoke. Carl was usually a man of steely resolve, but now he seemed almost broken. She felt a pang of sympathy, yet she couldn't ignore the possibility that he might be manipulating her, trying to win her empathy. "Did anyone else know about the pregnancy?" Marla pressed. Carl shook his head. "No one, not even Lena, and I'd like to keep it that way, for her sake." Marla left the office with mixed feelings. Carl's confession didn't absolve him, nor did it explain the blood-stained scarf found in Lena's car. But as she reflected on his words, another thought struck her. If Carl truly wanted to protect his family, it was possible he hadn't shared the full extent of his interactions with Emily. That evening, Marla decided to pay a visit to Caleb. He had been hesitant to come forward in the first place, but Marla sensed there was more he hadn't told her. When she arrived at his small apartment, Caleb looked anxious, fidgeting as he invited her inside. "Caleb, I need you to be completely honest with me," Marla said gently, sensing his nervousness. "Did you see anything else that night? Anything at all?" Caleb glanced around as if the walls were listening. Then, in a quiet, trembling voice, he whispered, "I saw Lena there too. After Carl left, she showed up. She was yelling at Emily, calling her names, saying she'd ruin everything." He swallowed hard, his eyes wide with fear. Then she grabbed Emily's arm and dragged her towards the trees. "I didn't see what happened after that. I got scared and ran." Marla's heart raced as she processed this new information. If Caleb's story was true, Lena had confronted Emily that night, right after Carl's argument with her. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a tragic and disturbing picture. Determined to follow this lead, Marla obtained a search warrant for Lena's personal belongings. The following morning, she and a small team of officers combed through Lena's things. In a locked drawer of Lena's vanity, Marla found a crumpled note scrawled in hurried, angry handwriting. "You think you can trap him? This will end badly for you." It was the final piece Marla needed. Later that day, day, Lena was brought back to the station. This time, Marla didn't mince words. She laid out the evidence: Caleb's statement, the blood-stained scarf, and the threatening note. Lena's face twisted with rage, her composure finally cracking. She was going to ruin everything. Lena spat, her voice laced with venom. My husband, my marriage, my life. She had to be stopped. With the confession recorded, Marla knew the case had reached its tragic conclusion. Lena Stone's confession hit Pine Hollow like a thunderclap. The revelation that the sheriff's wife had taken matters into her own hands to protect her family rocked the small town, leaving neighbors, friends, and even law enforcement colleagues in stunned disbelief. In the final hours of questioning, Lena revealed how her jealousy and resentment had grown over time. She had always been suspicious of Carl's friendship with Emily, but hadn't confronted him directly. When she learned of the pregnancy, however, her anger turned to fury. She couldn't bear the thought of Carl's indiscretion destroying everything she'd worked to build with him. Driven by a twisted sense of duty to her marriage, Lena had followed Carl that night, seething with rage, and confronted Emily herself. She kept begging me to let her go, Lena admitted, her voice trembling. But I couldn't. I wanted her to know how much pain she was causing, how she was ripping my life apart. When Detective Marla Hayes asked Lena if she had intended to kill Emily, Lena fell silent. Eventually, she whispered, I didn't mean for it to go so far, but she fought back, and I lost control. Lena's confession and the physical evidence were enough to charge her with second-degree murder. As Lena was led away in handcuffs, she held her head high, a glint of defiance in her eyes, as if she still believed she had done what was necessary. Carl, too, faced the collapse of his life and career. Though he wasn't charged, his complicity in Emily's predicament was painfully clear to everyone in Pine Hollow. His betrayal of both Emily and his wife shattered his standing in the community. He submitted his resignation and left town shortly afterward. Unable to face the people he had once served, Detective Hayes closed the case with a heavy heart. The entire town seemed to mourn Emily's tragic fate, a life cut short by jealousy, betrayal, and the twisted desire for control.